cleared AY for 9213. Know that.
Clear, got it.
Hello again, rail fans. Welcome back to Central Florida, our home territory. As most of you know, I've been busy finishing up my 4-part series on a railfanning trip to Georgia from March that me and my buddy Dakota took. The trip was action-packed, so if you haven't already, I highly suggest watching the videos of it. But since editing and creating these videos took so long, I've accumulated a lot of random footage from sporadic railfanning from the past few months that I haven't had time to post. So enter the topic of this video: random railfanning all over the CSX system here in the Central Florida region. Milepost S808, the northernmost point of the Yeoman subdivision, where the 155-mile Wildwood sub begins, running all the way to Baldwin Yard via Wildwood and Ocala. An interesting signal and control point resides here, aptly named Zephyrhills Holdout for the hosting incorporated town. It's not common to see a single head signal like this on the S-line that's not ABS, meaning automatic block signal. Simply put, ABS signals shut off when the surrounding signal blocks are unoccupied, lighting up their indication or aspect when a train enters said block. This, however, is a normal dispatcher-controlled signal, always on like most, but curiously named Holdout, even though it doesn't guard any interlockings or junctions. But that's for a different video, and today's time in Zephyrhills yielded red signals and a reason to continue north. On this chilly and windy Sunday in February, we're enjoying the winter weather with a day trip to the S-Line without any specific plans, just looking for trains. Moving north along US 301 and paralleling the S-Line, we pull off at Owensboro, as I wanted to get a couple shots of the old Seaboard Coastline radio station box located right around the curve. This seemingly normal curved piece of trackage is actually rich in history, as 2 railroads used to cross here, now one blending into another to create the modern-day S-Line. From Zephyrhills north to here, the S-Line is actually ex-Atlantic coastline tracks, with the real S-Line paralleling it just a few miles to the west. During SEL days, the 2 lines were merged, making the SAL portion of trackage from here to Zephyrhills a redundant and useless runaround to the ACL sub that connected with the Vitus sub at Vitus Junction. So the SAL portion was cut out, and the ACL portion kept, at one point crossing the SAL here on its way to High Springs in northwest Florida. Now the lines have merged, with the High Springs side cut out, and the S-Line continuing north around the curve into Lacucci. Lacucci, like many other civilizations in this part of Florida, is a small quaint town made up of 2 rundown buildings, a U.S. post office, and 1,700 residents. While the railroad doesn't directly serve any customers here anymore, it still splits the village in 2 with a switch in signals known as the north end of Lacucci siding. But even though the cool day would be a nice atmosphere to enjoy the quiet of this small town in, we'd push north, still on the search for trains. And down Gresham Road we'd go, pulling off at the signals and crossovers named Rodell by the railroad. Good news would await us, with a high yellow or approach signal lit on track 2. This is the halfway point on the St. Catherine double track, with the main line continuing as track 2 through here, staying true to CSX's rubric for track 1 to always be on the left side looking north. Nevertheless, we'd set up here, as the southbound would already be clear of Bushnell, rounding the corner over Blackfoot Creek in the distance, calling as M853. With 2 GE wide cabs leading the way, M853 would roll south with freight for Miami. However, due to some maintenance curfew in effect along the South Florida portion of this same S-Line, the normal 4 in 453 was switched to 8 as a way of conveying that this train is running an alternate route or out of its normal time slot. After M853, we'd stop in for some food in Bushnell, wandering up into Wildwood after lunch. Oxford would be our preferred spot, the north end of the Wildwood double track, displaying a familiar scene with another approach-lit signal for a southbound. However, in a few minutes as the train approached, the aspect would improve to a high green. Our southbound would be L743, unit rock for Wildwood and Winston, along with mixed freight for the Lakeland area. He'd be short today with over 8,000 horsepower at the head end, using every bit of track speed they could through here.
XDL 74310, lead into CSX 5434, got a clear oxygen, second main track, one southbound.
L743 had orders to drop their cut of rock in Wildwood, but with the yard all filled up from the weekend's amount of traffic, the cut would have to be dropped in the number 2 main at Turnpike, just south of the yard. So knowing that we had a few minutes to spare, we'd relocate to the south end of the double track at Coleman, where L743 had a clear signal and permission to continue south.
CSXG, dispatch to Jacksonville, over. 74310, over. Alright, we're done, ready to blast off, got our concerts updated. Over.
Alright, you're done there, ready to blast off, head to Winston, no more work, is that correct?
That is correct. Head straight to Winston, pull in. Tell them we want to pull in.
Straight to Winston, pull in, alright. You can take off on signal indication now.
There we go, thank you.
With nothing else in the vicinity, we'd head home. But with the cooler weather comes the flourishing of Floridian crop, especially strawberries, hence the day off from school in early March to observe the Florida Strawberry Festival in Plant City. And what would be a trip to Plant City without catching a few trains at the infamous Diamonds? We'd catch a handful this cool night, with our first coming just before 6 p.m. as a late L779 would reverse onto the A-line to prepare for his trip back to Tampa. We'd get lucky this night, as only 20 minutes or so after 779 would clear, it would be Amtrak 92's turn to cross, with their Phase 1 Heritage Unit number 161 in the lead. The train would be over an hour late today, coming into Plant City around 6:20 p.m. at the very beginning of Golden Hour. It takes Amtrak trains about an hour plus to make their return trip out of their station stop in Tampa, giving me more than enough time to inspect the S-Line, which has been retimbered and given new rail around the 90-degree curve here that whips the line north. CSX tends to benefit their track crews by doing almost all of their track work and maintenance in the south during the colder winter months, making the piles of new ties and plates here a common sight. It's good to see this track get some care, as there have been rumors about CSX putting it under a test to see if it's actually needed for the amount of trains it gets daily. Tonight it would only see one, very late in the night, and too late for any rail fan out here. By dusk, the A-line interlocking signal had sat green for over 30 minutes, now finally indicating a clear for the crew of 92, now speeding north after a longer than usual station stop in Tampa. And not 30 seconds after 92's marker lights passed, a lunar white restricting indication would light up for IO44, the nightly intermodal train out of Tampa that obviously isn't far out. In another few minutes, the signals would continue to upgrade as 92 grew further out of sight, ending up with another high green for 44 as the moon would rise at the end of twilight. So with the moon lurking behind some clouds, IO44 would end off our night, with 2 AC-44s leading a train of high-priority intermodal for Jacksonville. That's how I'd spend my Monday off from school in the strawberry capital of the South. About a week later, we'd begin the Georgia trip, and after that, we wouldn't go out for another couple weeks. But between the demanding end-of-year school schedule, I'd get a text from a local Tampa Railfan telling me that CSX would shortly be sending out L781, the Brooksville sublocal, with one of only 10 of CSX's ST70AHs leading. One of these locomotives have never led a train or been on the sub for that matter, so we'd leave the house just before 8 p.m. for the catch. And not 3 minutes after pulling into the parking lot of the familiar Lutz McDonald's, our train was here. L781 would drag out a couple rail fans along the sub with its novelty power. The 4-car train would be switched out between Land O'Lakes and Brooksville, returning to Tampa just after midnight with a string of cement hoppers from Cemex. We'd go home happy with our catch, but would be out just 11 days later.
Very short.
394, drop a 3-step, unclear, knock and check your brakes.
It's now the mid-morning of April 22nd, 2023, and I've cut out the entire day to spend with my friend Dakota, checking out some spots around Wildwood, catching whatever trains would come our way. And pulling into Dr. MLK Avenue in Wildwood, we can see M452, stopped at the signal named Wildwood. Sometimes called South Wildwood by crews, this is the location of the crossovers just south of Wildwood Yard, located just feet away from the Conrad Yelvington Distribution Center. And although the head end of the train would be down there, the crew would technically be switching Turnpike, another crossover aptly named for its location under the Florida Turnpike overpass. Today's 452 crew had orders to pick up 30 cars out of Track 2 and add them to the front of their train now sitting on Track 1. First, the crew would uncouple their 2 lead motors from the train and cross over onto Track 2.
Up and right, clear. Restricted signal. Wildwood to the 2. Restricted by hand signal. 3394.
With the signal now to reverse onto their cut of cars, 452 would back down onto Track 2 and hook on. Next, they'd pull the entire train out of Track 2, making sure all 30 cars were now clear of the Track 2 to 1 switches. Finally, they'd back onto the rest of their train to sit at the crossing for over 20 minutes doing Lord knows what. With a 40-minute drive south to Dade City and a small window to complete a few errands in the area, now quickly closing, we'd abandon 452 at Wildwood and head south. So it wouldn't be until later that evening that we'd finally get anything, starting in Vitus Junction for train IO44. The evening intermodal train has been leaving earlier than usual, making it to Vitus with a full head of steam today at 6:30 p.m. So with a nice 3-locomotive lash up and Tropicana reefer cars once again riding behind the engines, we chased the train as far north as we could. Jumping in the car right behind IO44, we'd catch him again for a brief shot at Ellerslie as we prepared to pace the train through Dade City. Through Dade City we'd go, getting ahead on US 301, giving us about 45 seconds to spare as we set up at South End Lacucci.
Lacucci, 44 and 533 northbound.
CFX detector milepost 825.9. No defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axles 198. Detector out.
The golden light now was getting perfect, so with 44 speeding north, we'd take one last risk and follow him to Bushnell. And one last time north of St. Catherine, as IO44 speeds past at track speed.
IO44 is 533 clear at St. Catherine. Number 2, single main, northbound.
That would be it for that day, extremely slow, but ending with a good chase. Ironically, Dakota and I would be back out later that week for the Dade City Heritage and Cultural Museum's Railfan Friday night.
72928, CSX 415. Clear signal south end Dade City, northbound now.
At the time, it was an annual event, but now the museum has opted for a once-a-quarter schedule, making the event obviously more often, which hopefully will draw more people to the museum. For now, however, food trucks, model trains, and more would keep us all entertained with the occasional train passing by.
CSX T-4428, number CSX T-387, clear on the south end, Dade City, we're northbound now.
This year, the museum would host a plethora of activities, displaying new locomotives and rolling stock on the numerous HO scale layouts, and even selling HO and O scale trains in the main room. The museum would also sell their own branded merchandise, with shirts for the event, with pins and more with the museum's logo. 2 food trucks would be parked outside, vending sandwiches, wings, and more. Altogether, the museum had all the amenities set up for a great night, and that it was. The event ended just after 9 p.m., but a few other rail fans and I would stick around as we had 2 trains on their way south, the former being IO45, nightly intermodal service for Tampa, passing through Dade City around 10 p.m. Last train of the night would come just before 10:30, calling as L74326. With unit rock up front, this train would be massive, clocking the DD at the north end of town at around 10,000 feet. With freight for Winston in the Bone Valley, L743 would also have a cut of auto racks on his bottom end, an abnormality for this train, yet it doesn't surprise me. And that would end about 2 months of rail fanning the Central Florida region, experiencing the change of cold to warm weather from winter to spring. I have lots of cool video ideas in the making right now, so I hope y'all will stay tuned, as summer is right around the corner, giving me much more time to film and edit videos like these. But until we meet again trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.